Hello and welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone had a good break. We've had very excellent talks and presentations this morning, and now it's the time for our panel discussion on preserving the integrity of the scholarly record, opportunities for editors. So during this panel today, we'll be discussing the role of metadata in advancing research integrity in scholarly publishing. And we'll also talk about some key metadata elements that all journals should seek to adopt in the coming years, and what are the frameworks for leveraging metadata to advance research integrity. This session, we are hoping to bring together different perspectives from the scholarly community, and we are very keen to hear from our speakers today about how they think their community can play a role in this endeavor. So we'll start off with speaker introductions, and I'll request everyone to share a bit about their role and how their work relates to metadata and this discussion. So I can go first. My name is Madhura Amdekar. I am a community engagement manager working at Crossref. I work with editorial organizations, editors, and publishers to develop engagement programs that help them leverage metadata for preserving the integrity of the scholarly record. Preserving the integrity of the scholarly record is a really important aspect of research integrity, and that's somewhere metadata plays a really important role. At Crossref, we are focused on making sure that we are distributing and collecting the right metadata trust signals that helps everyone in the community to ascertain the trustworthiness of research outputs. And with that aim, we have created a special program called the Integrity of the Scholarly Record, or the ISR program, and I lead our engagement efforts around that. Can I pass it on to Daniela next, who's my co-moderator for this session?
Hello, great to be joining everybody virtually. My name is Danielle Padula. I'm the head of marketing and community development at Scholastica. So in my role, I guide our branding and communication strategy, and I also support product roadmap planning. A big part of that is thinking about metadata and the needs of our customers, how the market is evolving, how the publishing life cycle is evolving. Of course, metadata touches every part of it. So I think about metadata quite a lot. I've created a lot of kind of guides and blogs for our customers around how to use our products and services, how they relate to metadata, and then also just kind of metadata best practices more broadly. So it's a topic I'm very interested in, and I'm excited about today's discussion. And I'll go ahead and pass it off to my co-virtual panelist, David.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Haber. I'm the publishing operations person at the American Society for Microbiology. We publish around 16, 17 journals, and my particular focus and love for metadata comes from the fact that I help manage the teams that operate the journals from submission to publication online. And what that means, and from a metadata perspective, is that we're really concerned about capturing good metadata, making sure we're QCing it well, and making sure it's all integrated in a process that's easy to distribute to all our customers. And I'll pass it back to Alice.
Hi, thanks everyone. Lovely to be here with you. I have to say I'm a little intimidated by being in a room full of proper editorial experts, as although I have many years experience of publishing and scholarly publishing, I never worked in editorial. My background's in marketing and communications. My love of metadata started when I joined ORCID from working in scholarly publishing for some time, and worked as a director of community engagement, and then moved to NISO, the National Information Standards Organization, which also does a lot of work that's related to metadata. So I guess I'm passionate about it. I'm not a technical expert in terms of metadata, but I believe strongly in its value, not just to our community, publishing community, and the wider scholarly community, but actually to the whole world. So that's the perspective I'm going to be trying to bring to you.
Thank you, everyone. So for today's panel, we have a few questions that we have prepared to ask our speakers. And in the meantime, for all the online participants joining us, please feel free to add your questions in the chat and the Q&A, and Daniela will be monitoring that as well. And over to you, Daniela, for kicking us off.
Okay, great. All right, so our first question is around the role of metadata. When we discuss the role of metadata and benefits of machine-readable metadata in scholarly publishing, There's often a focus on content categorization and indexing, with many in the community perceiving working with metadata as more of a technical or a production workflow issue. Why should scholarly journal editors and publishers care about metadata beyond just the technical side? And I'll go ahead and hand that over to David first.
To me, metadata is crucial to helping make connections between all the disparate pieces that involve science communication, science creation, science gathering. And it's not just about identifying something in this category or that category. It's helping identify the who, the what, the where, and the why. And if we're really efficient about metadata capture, it makes the entire process better, more clear, and allows us to make connections we weren't able to make before about who we are, what we do, and why we're doing something. That's what I have right now. So Alice, if you have anything else.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with everything you just said, David, and I'd like to maybe just take a step back and say, from my perspective, it's absolutely not just a technical production thing. Everybody should care about metadata. And I think we have an image to put up that's a little infographic that we put together at my organization, More Brains Cooperative, to demonstrate how using, in this case, persistent identifiers or PIDs, and having the metadata associated with those persistent identifiers flow around between all the different components of the research ecosystem. So not just publishers, but also funders and institutions and societies and publishers, and of course, researchers themselves. This is an interactive infographic, so I'm not going to show it to you now, but if you're interested, you can go to our website and have a little play around with it. But I think that's really, really important because, again, not just a technical thing, not just for journals, not just for publishers, but for everyone. It's going to help improve things, and for the reasons that David just said. So I think the connections and the sort of reliable connections that metadata enables, that the persistent identifiers enable you to make, are critical. And I should say, I'm going to come at this in a bit of a PID way, because that's kind of my background. But the valuable thing about persistent identifiers isn't just that they uniquely identify things and they can be connected, it's that they're associated with so much, or they can be associated with so much valuable information in the form of metadata. So I think that's really where the value is, and the value to all of you as editors is that metadata will help you better understand your authors and your reviewers and your editors by connecting them with all the different elements of their work and their contributions and the places that they work and so on.
Thank you, Alice. If I can add to that, I think everybody should care about metadata because there's a lot of information in metadata. It can be used as trust signals. When you think of scholarly metadata, you also sometimes think of some bibliographic data like names of authors or DOIs or titles. But there's a lot of other information as well that's available in metadata. For example, retractions and corrections. That's something that a lot of people are thinking about these days. It's very crucial information. That's author identities, affiliations, ORCID IDs, ROR IDs, abstracts, references. So all of this gives a lot of context about any scholarly output. It tells you who the authors were of a work, what else have they published, who have they been funded by, where have they been affiliated with. So all of this information is in metadata, and this is why editors, publishers, everybody in the scholarly ecosystem should care about it, because if you have this context that comes from metadata, it allows everyone in the community to assess the trustworthiness of a research output. So the more or less metadata you have associated with a DOI, there's that much more information available for you to assess the trustworthiness of those research outputs. And if this metadata is open, it's available openly. There are several downstream services that many of you are using on a daily basis, which use this metadata to track all of these things. And this is why everybody should be using metadata and contributing to metadata as much as possible. So yeah, my pitch is metadata is really important as trust signals, and that's why editors should care about that as well. With that, I'd like to move on to our next question. And I was wondering if you can speak to how metadata supports research integrity as a trust signal, which I just mentioned, and maybe share one or two case studies from your experience. So maybe I'll start with David.
Sure. This trust signal concept, I think, is crucial both to research integrity and also just helping everyone as editors and as readers identify what is going on with the research around us. So I'm going to tell you a little story about myself. So like we said before, my name is David Haber, right? I'm a publishing operations director with the American Society for Microbiology. But I was presenting at a conference and my badge said, my name's Dave Harbour. I'm affiliated with KGL and I'm a publishing workflow analyst. And I don't know if some of you may know someone named Jen Regala, who is a mover and shaker in the world of scholarly publishing, and she knows me as Aspet Dave. And some people know that I wrote a book as David Haber, and if you look me up on Amazon, it says that I wrote healthcare books, which I didn't. So if Jen Regala were to try to find me, because she knew me as Aspet Dave back in the past, and she looked on Amazon because she heard I wrote a book, and she wanted to contact me to do some kind of work for her, she very likely would contact the wrong Dave Haber because I'm identified on Amazon of having wrote this book that I've never written. And that can cascade in these scholarly publishing workflows to situations where you've identified the wrong person to do a task that you really want help with, maybe in peer review, maybe on reviewing a grant, maybe on asking an opinion about a certain kind of research, and you'll end up with the wrong Dave Haber. And just as an aside, this is fascinating to me, this kind of confusion we have with names and affiliation, because my CEO for the longest time called me Dan. So that adds another wrinkle. So if I don't even know as a living person sometimes who I am, how is a machine going to know who I am? And those machines are the things that help us make connections in this day and age. So like metadata to me is the most crucial piece of identifying who you are, and adding trust signals to that is vital to making these connections that are critical in moving science and communication forward.
Alice, do you have any case studies or
So
examples?
I have a mini version of your story, Dave, which is when I first joined ORCID, my dad was a fairly renowned academic whose initials are AJ Meadows, and I'm also AJ Meadows, and he was very skeptical about the value of having an ORCID record. So I said to him, well, Dad, you know, I write occasionally as AJ Meadows, and I write kind of, you know, blog posts and things like that. You write proper scientific articles. Do you really want people to be confusing the two of us? He was like, okay, and got his ORCID record and filled it in fairly promptly after that. So totally with you, Dave, on that one. But I think to continue with the question, I mean, and you alluded to this, Madhura, I think provenance is really what's key to the trust signal aspect and the research integrity aspect of metadata. It's who put what, where, when, not necessarily why. I don't think you can usually tell that in metadata, but, you know, has it been changed? Was it added by an institution or an organization or a person that you trust? So having that information available as part of the record, I think, is absolutely critical. And to give a maybe more scholarly example of, I think, how it could be used, you know, if you're looking for a new editor-in-chief or editorial board members and you want to, as much as you can, verify that they are who they say they are and they've published what they said they have. And, you know, maybe they're known to you and that's fine. But my youngest son is a development editor at PLOS, and he has to sort of go out and find people, you know, beyond he's been tasked with finding people beyond the usual suspects. And one of the ways he's able to do that is by, for example, using their ORCID record and then looking at the trust markers on the ORCID record to help him feel confident that the person that he's going to approach about this is actually who they say they are and has published what they say they have.
Thanks, Alice. I'll pass it on to Danielle. Do you have any case studies or any examples to share with us?
I would say building off of authorship, I think an exciting metadata advancement that's picking up steam now is credit. That's the contributor roles taxonomy. So that's kind of going beyond not only the trust signal, but also when we talk about research integrity, the transparency indicator. And with credit, it essentially makes it possible to give attribution for the various roles involved in developing a piece of research beyond just the kind of formal authorship role. Perhaps someone who was involved in data collection, someone who was involved in coding or technical development for a project. So I think that's a really exciting example of, as well as how metadata can help to not only give those trust indicators for individuals, but then also help to connect the whole research story. And that can also help you sort of track and trace, right? Like who was involved in this research? Who did these different aspects of the research? How did they connect? If I'm looking, for a journal that they were looking to find a reviewer with a particular skill or an editor with particular skills, with credit, you can even kind of dig in further. That's obviously a more nascent metadata standard that's developing. I encouraged all the editors at ease here to check it out, but I think it has a lot of potential over time to create a lot of new connection opportunities. And I think as we're talking about, that's really kind of the role of metadata. It's sort of that connector function. Something else I would say is fair data, making data associated with research findable, accessible, interoperable, and replicable. So that would be another case of making that data open and assigning DOIs to data sets. Now you make it much more feasible for those doing peer review or even readers after the fact to be able to look at what is the actual data source behind this research and can I corroborate that for myself. So I think those are some exciting additional opportunities. And moving on to our next question, we wanted to ask, how can publishers and editors help inform developments in the area of leveraging metadata as trust signals, speaking to current and future opportunities? So how can publishers and editors sort of get more people on the metadata bandwagon? And I'll pass that off to Alice first.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd really urge you to just get involved. There's lots of opportunities to get involved in the community organisations that provide much of the persistent identifiers and metadata. NISO, where I used to work, has a lot of its work involves metadata, and you don't have to be a member to get involved. You can join one working group without being a member, and anybody is welcome to propose new ideas for standards and also to comment on standards as they get drafted for publication. So I think there's ways you can get very concretely involved. I think also, as with much of what we're working on, this is a community endeavour. So, if you spot things that are wrong with metadata, please report them. Organisations like Crossref, you can't keep an eye on absolutely everything that's out there, but if you find a broken link or, there's something wrong with a DOI, go to the Madhura, go to the Crossref team. But I know that they will, when I was at Orchid, we relied on people telling us when they spotted a problem. So there's got to be this kind of community commitment to trying to preserve the metadata record for the scholarly record. So we all share responsibility for that. I think also just spreading the word in your community. I mean, I'm going to keep probably going back to Orchid because that's my background, but also because, Orchid as a researcher ID is so integral to all of what we do. The researcher is at the heart of everything we do. And so everything about them can be connected to their Orchid record, their institution, their funding, their outputs and so on. So really working to encourage, or as I think somebody said in the last session, maybe even require your authors to have Orchid IDs, ideally your co-authors to have Orchid IDs, reviewers, editorial board members. And it's a two-way thing. It's not just you asking them to do something and it's another horrible thing that they have to do. It's something that they can actually benefit from as well. You can recognize them. You can add to their Orchid record if you're an Orchid member or if you use Crossref. You can add their publications, you can add their editorial service and so on. But also the hope is, and I'm going to be talking a bit more about this tomorrow in my own talk, that by adding more to an Orchid record and then making it easy for people to take stuff from that Orchid record to populate other systems that they use, they're actually going to save time for researchers. And some of the work we've done at More Brains has demonstrated a pretty substantial amount of time can be saved by using persistent identifiers and metadata in that way. Oh, I did actually just want to give a little call out at this point to Crossref, who have just, you may have seen this, have just instituted their metadata awards for organisations that are doing a particularly good job in terms of their metadata practice. And so if you want inspiration for how to be a good metadata, I strongly suggest that you go and take a look at those winners and what they've done, because there's some really inspiring stories there. I'm not sure who I'm handing over to. Sorry.
I think we should go to David, whose organization ASM actually won one of the inaugural Crossref Metadata Awards.
Yeah, we were surprised, but very happy that this sort of hidden work that had been going on for years to help clean up our metadata actually helps the community. And I think this idea of making what's sort of invisible, this metadata stuff, this invisible sort of identifying attributes of things and people and places, integrated into workflows in a way that's intuitive and easy to understand will help everyone in our community sort of recognize the value of these kinds of indicators, both in terms of trust and also connection. And I feel like as a publisher, one of our main purposes, other than promoting wonderful new science, is helping make connection. And if we change our perspective about what it is we do, we are just not publishers of widgets called science. We are also a community of people trying to make connection and grow the connection. And as editors and as people embedded in our workflows, if we recognize that, then the value and purpose of metadata and encouraging its uptake, whether it's through ORCID, whether it's helping institutions better identify themselves, whether it's helping funders make connections to researchers and their research outputs, that can only help and grow the science and the research we're trying to encourage to help us all.
I like that perspective shift a lot. I think the idea of publishers as connectors is a really cool kind of framework to go from. And Madhura, I know at Crossref, obviously, you're all working to get people to leverage metadata in all of its forms. So I wanted to see if you had anything to add to this question too.
Sure. Thank you, Daniel. I think to add on to what Alice and David already said, editors and editorial offices are at the forefront of upholding the integrity of the work that they publish. So I think in that sense, metadata is a really key resource that's available for them. Also, because editors are in a unique position. They know their community, they know the authors, they know the reviewers, they are in close contact with editorial boards. So they are best positioned to understand what's the key metadata elements that are prevalent in their community for assessing trustworthiness. Because we know that research practices differ, they differ from subject to subject, they differ also in geographical areas. So because of their unique position, editors are really in a good position to feedback to us that which are the metadata signals that act and signal trust in their community. They can also encourage their community members, they can encourage authors to submit these key metadata elements and sort of promote this awareness in their community. Sometimes in certain journals, editors are also responsible for policies, so they can certainly play a key role in encouraging and developing policies that make sure that key metadata is being captured, and not only being captured, but also fed through the system by submitting it to organizations like Crossref, which then make it openly available. So I think in that way, editors have a really important role in this entire scholarly ecosystem. So I'll move on, and my next question, I'll first request Alice to respond. So when you think of journal metadata and the subsequent content registration deposits to support research integrity, what are some of the must-have metadata elements that you consider which are critical for signaling trust? And if then I would to ask you, what would be the ideal metadata elements that you'd like to see so that metadata is as comprehensive as possible from a research integrity standpoint?
So I think my answer to this is to both questions in a way is provenance information. I think that is just so critical, provenance information, so where the information has come from, basically, because that is the basis to me for all sort of trust. You know, as I say, if you know that the organisation or individual who's added this information is somebody you can trust, therefore you can probably trust the information they've added. It's not to say people don't make mistakes, but it does vastly improve the trust level from my perspective. I'm also going to inevitably say that I think ORCID IDs are an absolutely critical part of the scholarly record from a trust perspective. Again, going back to ORCID has these trust markers, which means that you can more easily, not verify, but raise your trust level about somebody if they have a complete ORCID record with lots of trust markers on it. That gives you a lot of very high indication that this is information that you can trust. And if much of that information, which it is typically on an ORCID record, is connected with other persistent identifiers like DOIs and raw IDs and things like that, again, you just keep building that trust. So I think I cheated on the answer a little bit, but anyway, that's my cheating answer.
No, great. That's something we keep hearing from our community as well, that affiliation information, identity figures very prominently in everybody that I talk to. They want to know who the authors are. They want to know who the editors were. They want to know who the reviewers were. So this is something that we keep hearing from our community. I wonder, Dave, whether you have any thoughts on what are the must-have metadata elements and the nice-to-have metadata elements?
To me, I because so much of our work centers around authorship and editors and the who, I have to echo Alice. ORCID as a hub and as the collector of trust markers is critical, because that can feed into other key metadata elements as long as you understand provenance, right? So affiliation, super important. Identifiers about the where, right? But that isn't truly valuable until there's a trust signal indicating, oh yeah, I'm from this institution and the institution has somehow confirmed it, or publishing activity has somehow confirmed it, or grant writing activity has somehow confirmed it. Funding metadata, another crucial thing, because it helps us connect people to grants, to research outputs, which is all something we're fascinated and really interested in. References are important, just in the publishing business that we're in. But they all point to trust and provenance. And I think Alice is like dead on. This is like the key to all metadata, because we can say and we can encode metadata as bits and bobs for different things. But if we don't have the trust signals validated by third parties saying that this actually happened, or this is who they say they are, then the metadata is just noise. So making the connection itself between the metadata through trust signals, I think, is really the critical thing. It's less important about the 3 or 4 metadata bits, but the trust of those bits becomes crucial.
Yeah, thank you, David. And lastly, Danielle.
Yeah, no, I think that David and Alice really covered all of the points there. I think open citations is, I would say, a big one that I think not everybody is doing. The initiative for open citations is a great initiative to check out. That's I4OC. And then related article DOIs is also an opportunity. I think, again, with the idea of connecting research outputs and making it easier for folks to see where information came from and how it connects to other, a piece of information, not only articles necessarily, but also data sets and whatnot related to it. So moving to the next question, and actually kind of nicely dovetails off of that idea of it not only being about articles. In many ways, open infrastructure providers like Crossref are the foundation that kind of holds metadata together by facilitating the creation of persistent metadata records, and from there, a network of relationships between those records. Crossref refers to their Crossref Research Nexus, which is a vision they have of building out this infrastructure to support research integrity, where all of the parts and pieces are connected. And I'm curious, what are available research integrity tools and services that editors should know about, and how can they leverage them? And Madhura, I want to ask you first. I know Madhura has some slides to share from Crossref on that.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. So you mentioned the research nexus, and I just have this one slide that shows the research nexus. So essentially, it shows you how the scholarly record looks like. So when we talk about scholarly record, it's not just the output. So when I say outputs, think of a journal article, but it's also the inputs that go into its creation. So the data sets that led to that study, any software that was used or created, and the relationships between these things. Probably there was a preprint that was deposited in the repository that led to a journal article. So all of these connections and they make up this big network of things which we call the research nexus. That's available for the scholarly community to continue to build upon. And one of the very important aspects of this research nexus is the metadata that we have been talking about. Metadata has a crucial role to play there, because that's what provides context to this record. It tells you, like I said before, who the authors were, who were they funded by, and so on. So at Crossref, the role is to provide infrastructure to anybody who is publishing any kind of research output, so that they are able to provide metadata about what they are publishing and how their outputs fit into this scholarly record. And so with that, there are a few services and tools that Crossref has, and many members use that. Probably many of you are already aware of these. The first one that I want to highlight is Crossmark, because this is a service that members can use to report updates, such as retractions and corrections, which are really important these days. As we have been hearing from our speakers as well. So members who avail this service, they display this logo on their web pages as well as PDFs. And readers, if they just click on this logo, they'll be able to see what the most up-to-date status of that item is. Has the item been retracted? Has it been corrected? Or is it just there has been no change to that item? Crossmark allows members to register metadata about retractions and corrections, but I do want to highlight that even if you're not using Crossmark, as a member, you can still register retractions and update that metadata in your records, which is really crucial, because if you're publishing a retraction notice, but you're not feeding that metadata, there's no way that readers can see that the work has been retracted. So it's really important to feed that information through the system. And related to that, in 2023, we acquired and opened up the Retraction Watch database as well, which is a database of retractions and corrections. So at Crossref, we come to know of retractions only when members deposit that information, but the team behind Retraction Watch, they go looking out for this information. They are looking at publisher websites, they are doing the research, and they are collecting information on retraction and correction and including it in their database. Now, because this database is now openly available and the data is available via Crossref APIs, this fills a critical gap for anybody who's looking at retraction data. They have a much bigger data set of retractions and corrections to look at. So this is really important as an editor, as a publisher, if you want to see what work has been retracted, are you reading most up-to-date work, any tools and services that are building upon this data. This is really important for them as well. One of the most well-known services is the similarity check service, which is really helpful for editors. Basically, editors upload a manuscript, and then this service provides a report that shows them the percentage of overlap between the manuscript that they have uploaded and already published content. As the previous speaker said, the report always needs human intervention. You need to look into where the overlap is coming from which sections, has the work been referenced, and so on. But I think it's still an important service that helps you to assess whether there is an overlap between this work and the work that's already published. And lastly, I want to highlight one tool which is called participation reports. This is, I think, incredibly useful for editors, but probably many may not know about this. So this is a tool that helps you to visualize your metadata. So if you can go, I've included a link below in the slide. If you can just go there and you start entering the name of the member, it shows you a report with 11 key metadata elements that are useful for discoverability. And it shows you the percentage of DOIs that have those metadata registered for them. So you can use this report to gauge your own metadata completeness. How much metadata are you depositing? You can also look up maybe a competing organization or your sister organization in order to see how much metadata coverage there is. So these were some of the tools that I just wanted to highlight that can be important for editors and publishers as well.
For sure. Thanks for that, Madhura. And David, do you have anything to add as a Crossref award winner? Any thoughts on using their tools?
I will say the participation reports is a spectacular tool to measure how we are progressing against our own sort of roadmap of what we're trying to accomplish with metadata improvement and how it all fits into our publishing workflows. So we use that a lot just to see where are our gaps, what can we do better, and how it helps us prioritize. By looking at the gap, we can see, oh, we have a major problem with affiliation identification, for example. So why is that? Where do we have a hole? How is that causing problems in our research integrity efforts? Can we insert a tool or something different in our workflows to help improve that downstream? So I find the participation reports a spectacular thing to look at.
For sure. And anything to add to that, Alice?
Well, I'd probably be remiss not to mention the STM Integrity Hub, especially with Caroline in the room somewhere, I think, who can answer your questions if you have any. But I did also just want to reiterate something that came up in the last panel, I think, which is that there are so many research integrity tools out there. And you, I think, need to do the work to evaluate your processes and workflows first before thinking about what are the right ones for you. So I think I couldn't possibly recommend one of the many and expanding many tools, but there are a lot, and I'm sure there will be one or more to meet your purposes.
Yeah, I think the idea of really thinking about what is your particular need as a journal, as part of a larger publishing organization, is a really good thought with that too, because the best starting place will be different depending on the journal, the discipline, and all of these things to kind of have the most impact as quickly as possible. And I think that's the goal that we would all have. And I know we have more questions, but we're real close to time, Madhura. Should we move on to audience questions to give folks a chance to ask questions?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I see a couple online. Should I grab one of those and then maybe we could do an in-person?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, so I think this is interesting. It's kind of broadening the conversation beyond just the publisher role. This is a question asking, what should researchers and institutions prioritize in their metadata to increase the visibility and credibility of their research outputs? I think we touched on a lot of these points, but anybody have anything to add to that? ORCID is a big one, of course.
I don't think I can. I mean, I do think ORCID is a large part of the solution to this. And what institutions can do is to strongly encourage their researchers to get an ORCID and make it easy for either to add information directly to the ORCID record on behalf of their researchers, which is ideal, or at least make it easy for their researchers to do so, integrating it into the institutional systems, not just publishing systems, but any grant systems, HR systems. I think there's a lot of opportunity there that isn't being exploited at the moment.
Are there any questions in the room? Oh, yeah.
I have more statement than a question. I just wanted to let people know that on Science Open, we are an aggregator. I'll tell you a little bit more about our platform later, but we are really using a lot of the data from Crossref. So we're a metadata affiliate. We get a DOI. We go and get the publicly available metadata. So if you want to see what your journal metadata looks like in the wild, you can actually go onto Science Open, look up your journal, and you can see like, oh, we don't have open access symbols. That's a bit too bad. Or because this is how computers are seeing your metadata and what a startup out here is actually doing with your metadata to get you more visibility without you doing anything. And that's all based on having really rich metadata. So it's not just for the greater good and whatever, but it's actually like people like us working hard to send readers and back to your homepage, but we can send more of them if it has an abstract or if it has, affiliation data. So just a tip, if you want to see what it looks like, check out scienceopen.com.
I think that's a really good point, Stephanie, actually, because I think the focus of this was more on research integrity, but of course, the benefits of using metadata and persistent identifiers, discovery and recognition are not the only two, but two other really big benefits of having good metadata and using persistent identifiers. So thank you.
Yes, thank you all for this insightful information. I'm checking from time to time the participation report of our journal, but I'm struggling with references, but I have another question. It is related. We had a discussion a day or two ago about assigning DOI to the translated version of the same article. What are your recommendations regarding that? Do we need to assign a different DOI? Is it a sub DOI, or should we publish if we are publishing in multiple languages under the same DOI? So there are different opinions. My journal is publishing only in English, but I'm wondered about this for other journals as well. Thanks.
So I think in Crossref metadata, you can capture a relationship is translation of between translated versions of like an English version article and another. So definitely you can capture that relationship between the DOIs of those two articles using Crossref schema. So that's possible to link those two up to. Yeah. We have one more question.
More.
Okay. Yeah.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah. And then we move on.
You mentioned about essential elements and nice to have elements. I have a question about that. How critical are the initials of authors as a bibliographic element? I mean, let's imagine a situation where when we give a reference, we just do away with the initials of authors. How serious will that omission be?
I mean, I think if you have an ORCID record, the ideal thing would be to put all variations of your name in your ORCID record, particularly if you have a common name. I guess if you have a very uncommon name, it's probably a bit less critical, but generally speaking, we would recommend putting all the different name variations because different publishers have different styles for what, initials, first name, last name, whatever. And that way, as long as you're using your ORCID identifier, it doesn't matter what you do, it's going to bring you back to it's going to identify you as the correct author or whatever. So that would be my recommendation anyway.
We'll take the next question from the online audience, Danielle.
Sure. So let's see. Here's a question. Are article types captured in metadata?
Yeah, that's the article types can be captured, and we have different posted content types as well. So I would encourage you to look at Crossref documentation for the different article types that can be captured in the schema.
Can I add one caveat with that? It's really important to understand that frequently article types and what they're called, there's no real standard between publishers. So Crossref is one sort of standard maker of taking whatever you have originally and sort of translating it into something knowable by a machine, but so is PubMed, so is PMC, so is Web of Science, so is Dimensions, and they all have their own flavor of things and how they treat what they've identified you doing. So understanding that one organization may be calling something a case report, whereas another organization might identify that as some kind of research article is really important to understand because there's a lot of confusion that happens with that article type metadata.
I feel
That's a great point.
Practice coming on here.
No, I remember at Glasgow when we were working on our PubMed Central integration and the article type, it was interesting with seeing that they are different. Like there's not sort of that universal standard. So I think that's a very good point from David. And Madhura, do you have any additional in-person questions?
Okay, we are almost at time, so maybe
we're ready. Yeah.
Short question.
I'm Yulia Hartman from Ukrainian Regional Chapter Office. And first of all, thank you so much for such insightful presentation. If I may, I would like to raise a question regarding Crossref approach to particularly sensitive and complex issue. I would like to say, could you please share Crossref position on the assignment of DOIs to academic journals that are published in temporarily occupied territories and administrated by unrecognized or illegal authorities? Specifically, how does Crossref address the challenges of research integrity, transparency, and ethical consideration in such cases, especially where the status use of such territories and the authority behind the publication may be disputed under or clearly violate international law. So we would like to receive such answer from you.
Thank you, Ilya. I think that's a complex question. I would like to chat more with you and understand this so that I'll be able to better advise you about how these things are being dealt with by Crossref. But please come find me in the lunch break, and I'd love to chat with you about this to understand this. Thank you.
Can I just say before we go that it's just occurred to me very belatedly that Danielle and David, it's terribly early for you. So I feel like you get special kudos for being here, not quite in the middle of the night, but not in my book, not far off. So thank you both.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think we're almost at time. So I would like to thank Alice and Danielle and David for this excellent session today and for contributing. Thank you so much.